Whole show she's making inroads. We need to define the role of a first husband. The election is 2 weeks away, and 40% of the public still has no opinion on Peter Tonello. Sorry, but the CEO of a publicly traded company can't duck out of a stockholders' meeting for a luncheon. That's kind of my point. I think he would if you asked him. How do you know I haven't asked? Your attitude, that's how. It started right after the convention when Howe's camp floated those ugly rumors that you married Peter just to bankroll your political ambition. This is not a buy one, get two presidency. My marriage is my business. It would still be nice if the American people could see you two together sometime, especially as we get closer to Election Day. Just a few strategic public displays of affection, like Nancy and Ron Reagan. Newsflash, shouted one of her aides. Check out CNN. Allison moved closer to the main set. Wilcox raised the volume. General Howe was at the end of a short speech for the National Convention of the American Legion in Atlantic City. On screen, a handsome African-American man stood tall behind a chest-high podium facing an enthusiastic crowd. General Howe was an imposing figure even when wearing a simple business suit. Today I issue this challenge. Come out from your hiding place in the Washington jungle, Miss Leahy. It's time to debate me on the issues one-on-one. The election is almost over. The crowd erupted into louder cheers. Allison hit the mute button on her remote control. He's proposing a format that actually forces the candidates to think on their feet. If the previous debate showed anything about his speaking abilities, General Howe has more of the old college football jock in him than the commanding general. Careful, Allison, you're dealing with a military mentality. Howe wouldn't invite you to debate unless he were thinking ambush. Before we agree to anything, we need to have a very clear understanding of what he's proposing. Work out the details later. Set up a press conference before the rally in Philly. I want to make sure we air my response in time for the 6 o'clock news. All 4,000 red velvet seats in Atlanta's Fox Theater were filled with partisan politicos. Immediately following Allison's acceptance of General Howe's challenge, the Commission on Presidential Debates scheduled the debate in Atlanta 12 days before the election. Allison had spent the balance of Wednesday night and all of Thursday studying up on the issues, meeting with advisors and gathering last-minute tips from her consultants. Allison stood behind a mahogany podium to the audience's left. Lincoln Howe was to the right. "Good evening," said the moderator, "and welcome to the Campaign 2000 presidential debates. We have an unusual format tonight. A panel of 4 distinguished journalists, 2 selected by each candidate, have absolute freedom to ask whatever questions they wish." Allison scanned the audience as the moderator introduced the panel. She shared a subtle smile with her husband, Peter Tonello, who was seated in the second row. They'd dated casually a few months before her daughter Emily's abduction. He'd never been gorgeous, but if the ensuing tragedy and endless search had proven anything, it was that Peter was that rare breed of man who came through in times of need. The moderator turned to the panel. "Mr. Mawani, we begin with you, sir." Abdul Kahesh Mawani was a radical but respected former president of the National Association of Black Journalists. The distinguished old gentleman shuffled the note cards on the table before him, then laid them aside. He removed his reading glasses and held them in his hand like a professor with his pointer. "Come November 7th, the American people will do more than choose sides on issues. They will choose a leader, a person to lead them in this new millennium, a man or a woman who they will call their president. My question to both candidates is simply this. Have you ever broken your marital vow of fidelity?" The moderator spoke up. "Ms. Leahy, your response, please." She thought carefully about the question, measuring her response. She found Peter's eyes in the second row. He seemed stoic but supportive. Finally, she answered, speaking to the audience at large rather than directly to Mawani, or even her husband. "First of all, let me say that while I respect Mr. Mawani's right to ask whatever he likes, this character question is completely out of step with the tone of the issue-oriented campaign that both I and General Howe have waged so far. I'm proud of the fact that this presidential campaign has been conducted in a civilized and informative manner. I'm proud that both candidates have refused to stoop to the character-bashing, personal insults, and attacks on family members that have sadly become a trademark of American politics. Mr. Mawani's question really raises a larger issue. Will we as Americans hold fast to this important step forward we've taken and talk about issues rather than resorting to insults? Or will we move backward to a time when running for office meant open season on a candidate's most intimate and personal secrets, no matter how irrelevant to the issues in the election? Please understand what I'm saying. I can see circumstances where extremely personal questions might be relevant. If a candidate directly challenges the media and puts his or her marital fidelity at issue, that candidate should be prepared to answer some probing questions. If a credible third party comes forth with evidence that a candidate has engaged in immoral conduct, the public should expect a response. I do not think, however, that every candidate in every election should be forced, as a matter of course, to let the media look inside their bedroom. Therefore, in the interest of restoring a level of dignity to American political debate, I decline to answer the question simply as a matter of principle. A hearty applause rose from the left side of the auditorium. She glanced once again at her husband in the second row. He, too, was applauding. She breathed a discreet sigh of relief. "Quiet, please," said the moderator. The applause slowly faded. Mawani looked away, shaking his head in visible disgust. "General Howe," said the moderator. "Same question. Your response, please." Howe gripped the podium, squaring his shoulders to the center television camera. "My fellow Americans," he said solemnly, "nearly 4 decades ago, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. stood on the marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial and proclaimed to the American people, 'I have a dream.' He dreamed of a day when all people were judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I share that dream. All people should be judged by the content of their character. That includes men, that includes women, that includes whites, blacks, and people of all races. And most of all, that includes candidates for public office. It would seem that my opponent and I hold a very different set of principles. While Miss Leahy refuses to answer the question as a matter of principle, I will answer it, based on my principles. No, I have never broken my vows of marital fidelity, and I would never stand silent on something that, in my view, is the most sacred test of character for any man or for any woman." The Howe half of the auditorium erupted with a standing ovation. The moderator raised her arms. "Quiet, please. Quiet." The cheers only grew louder. Allison's heart thumped. She glanced at David Wilcox, who had warned her about an ambush from the very beginning. He was normally poker-faced in public. This time, however, his eyes said it all. The rest of the night was irrelevant. She'd just been slaughtered. Natalie Howe was the general's wife of 41 years. At 63, she was still the beauty that had attracted the young enlisted man she'd married in her hometown of Birmingham. Lincoln rubbed his hands together and looked at his wife. "This is the turning point, Natalie. Leahy has finally made the fatal blunder." "Must you gloat so much? It's as if you're more excited about her losing than you're winning." "What she did was downright cowardly. There's nothing the American people hate more than a politician who won't answer a question." "I can certainly think of one thing worse than a woman who won't answer any questions about marital fidelity." "What's that, honey?" "A man who lies about it." Natalie walked out of the room. By 6 o'clock, the first glow of morning light was seeping in around the edge of Allison's bedroom windows. She was staring wide-eyed at the ceiling as Peter lay sleeping at her side. She was still struggling over her conversation with Peter the night before. She was happy about the way he'd come through for her, agreeing to campaign at her side. Her joy, however, was overshadowed by a nagging concern over her inability to tell him the whole story behind her decision not to answer the adultery question. Her mind took her back to that evening in August. almost 2 months ago, wondering what made